I have too many D&D dice and nowhere to put them, so let's fix that with a book. In case you've never seen a book before, there's 4 main parts: the front, the back, the spine, and then the contents of the book. So let's get started on figuring out what our front cover is going to look like. My character was an Owlin, so I started with something with a more Nordic design, but then wanted to swap to something with a bigger focal point right in the front and silhouettes around it. Then I thought maybe something with a bit more carving detail throughout the full front cover would be nice. Then my DM killed off my character, so I was back to the drawing board to try to make a design that wouldn't be left in the past like my character. This is the design I came up with. It's a more generic design, so it should work with any class or character I make in the future, though you'll see later how I make it more specific to the class I'm playing now. The idea with this design is to use 2 different types of wood, maple for the center and walnut for the edges. Getting started on the covers, I'm going to cut these into 2 pieces in thickness, that way I can glue them together and start making the walnut parts of the cover. So let's get to that. Most of the wood that I'm using in this project is going to come from scrap pieces I have left over from other projects, so you'll see me gluing a lot of pieces together to make wider boards. Same with the walnut, I'm going to cut this maple board into a 1/4-inch strip by just running it through all 4 sides on my table saw. This maple is going to become the content portions of the book, which is going to comprise of a dice holder and a dice tray. As you can see here, my saw wasn't quite big enough to cut all the way through this piece, so I'm cleaning it up with my chisel right now so that way I have a smooth surface to work off of. The next step is bringing down everything to the proper thickness it needs to be. To do this, I'm using my handy benchtop planer. This will be used on the covers, the spine, and the contents of this book. For the cover of the book, I was looking to get a 1/2 inch, which it seems like we got. Now back to more planing. For the dice holder, I'm looking to get 5 sets of 7 dice, the standard amount in a D&D set. For the contents of the book, I was looking to get 3/8. It seems like we were right again. Now that everything's at the proper thickness, I'm also going to bring it to the proper width. Here I'm starting with my front and back cover to cut it clean to make sure the glue adheres properly. But while I'm at it, I'm also going to cut the pieces for the spine and the tray and holder. Now that I have these strips cut for my dice holder and tray, I need to add these small grooves across all of them called dados. With these, other pieces will slide in to make divisions. But first, I need to take these over to the miter saw and cut them all to proper length. So let's do that first. Now it's on to a woodworker's favorite thing, sanding. Though it really sucks, you need to do it, and it's a necessary part of every project you make. Now with my cover pieces cut up and put to proper thickness, I glued on these template pieces I had earlier to them. So now I'm going to cut along this line, and it will make it so the outside looks like that, with this maple piece right down in the middle. To cut these pieces out, I'm going to be using my bandsaw. Bandsaws are always really fun to work with, because you get to cut cool curves and stuff you normally don't get to do on something like a table saw. Though you gotta be careful with these things. As you can see, I cut a lot of these small lines throughout each of these pieces before going into curves. They're called relief cuts. They make it so the blade doesn't flex too much, which can really dull a blade or even snap it in the worst of circumstance. Now with these all cut out, they're looking good, but as you can see, even with a good hit, they don't fit together. The reason is you can see all these ridges that the bandsaw left from not cutting exact. So now I'm going to go ahead and clean those up. To clean these up, I'm going to use a few tools, but the main one's going to be this big red Dremel you see me using a lot. Now with it pretty clean, I'm going to be using sandpaper and a knife to get it that last bit fit. You can see me holding the maple piece up to the walnut to mark off those little areas where it's still sticking at. And with all that fitting, you can now see it properly come together. I'm now finally doing that thing I said earlier about dadoing these pieces, adding those grooves in. This is pretty annoying as there's so many pieces and I had to add a lot of grooves to each of them, but I had to do it so that way I can start gluing up all of my pieces together. Now it's on to assembly and gluing. I first started with my dice tray, which ended up looking like this at the end. Then I moved on to the dice holder. This was pretty annoying as there's all these small divider bits I had to hammer in and fit in nice, but in the end, it looked pretty good when it all came together. Then I went on to gluing in my front cover, putting those pieces in and clamping it. Here I'm clamping downwards to keep it flat. When I made my dice holder, I made the top and bottom both sealed, so now I'm going to cut it in half, that way I have a separate top and bottom. Forgive as reality distorts, as I think my footage got corrupted in this one. So, now with my top and bottom in two separate pieces, I realize there's one issue. When I throw a dice in here and I close it up, it leaves a gap and it won't close properly, so that means that it's too short now. So I'm going to end up taking this top and throwing it away and make a whole new one. I decided I would try to make the top out of solid this time, but nothing went right with it. I tried hauling it out with the router and saw, and as you can see here, I even made a bit of a mistake, nearly cut my finger off. So I decided to scrap it and just make it like the others. So here's how the new top went. Went pretty well. I made it the same, but I added that little swoop there so it's easy to open up when everything's put together. With my front and back cover glued up now, I'm going to cut the bottom and the top to size. That way both of these will be done and ready. When playing the front and back cover, it ripped out right there, which kinda sucks. So I'm going to add this clasp to the front of the book. To do that, I'm just going to use my chisels and saw to cut it out and have it be a nice and tight fit. Then I'm going to come in with a knife and just bevel the inside of this. That way it gives it a bit more detail and character to the design. Next, I'm going to put this clear coat on all my pieces before assembly. This will give it a nice and clean look. Then I'm going to put in these magnets into my dice holder. That way it won't come apart while it's in travel. To mark the magnets on the other side, I'm going to do this trick where I put a dab of paint on each of them and then line up the top very carefully to transfer the mark. I'm also going to do this same trick to the clasp to the front cover. So, I did find one problem that I had. When I would put all my dice nicely in here, and I would pick it up and give it a nice shake around, I would open it up to see they're all scrambled up. So to fix that, I add that same pattern into the top. This keeps them all secure and in place. With the book cover already, the next step is gluing in a piece of fabric in between all of these, but I do have one issue with fabric. As you can see, I can't seem to cut it straight, so I'm going to just need to try my best. Well, the fabric cutting didn't turn out too bad, so now I'm going to glue my spine pieces and my front and back cover to it. What this will do is give it a little bit of movement in between the fabric. Now I do that same trick with the clasp and glue my holder and tray in. So with the book together, there's one last thing to do, which is carving this emblem for the front. This is what I said earlier would make my book a little bit more custom. I'm going for a cloak and dagger design for the rogue on it. I spent a long time earlier trying to figure out what woods work best for every class, and ebony was dead set to be rogue, being one of the darkest woods and being near pure black. One thing I didn't realize, however, is that ebony is one of the hardest woods, and that made this a big pain to carve. Now to attach the emblem to the front, I'm going to use that same trick we did earlier with magnets. Embedding magnets into this will allow me to do something special, which will be swapping this emblem out for different ones, so that way I can change my class, and even if my character dies, I won't need to throw out the whole design. And with that, our book is complete. Well, that was our build for today. If you liked it, make sure that you like this video and subscribe down below. You can also leave a comment down below on anything you'd like to see me build next. With all of that, I'll see you next time.